Black families are worth around £34,000. According to the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, the median household wealth in the white household, £314,000. Literally 10 times more. That's around £280,000 difference per household. This isn't specifically about income, it's about wealth. So we're talking about property, pension, investments, the things that most people would say would help a family or a generation build wealth, build power, build stability over the long term. And the Black African community has a median wealth of £34,000. So I decided to do a bit of research into this to understand this gap. I want to help us understand it from a historical point of view, a societal point of view, economically what that means, and what we can do to level up the playing field. Now, this isn't a video to bash the white household. Of course not. There are things that we can and we should learn and adopt. According to the ONS, if you are a white British household, and let's say your typical wealth sits at around £314,000. That usually includes things like property, a workplace pension, maybe an ISA, or in many cases, just some form of savings. But if you are from the Black household, and this is why we need to have much more of these conversations to understand the underlying issues and the underlying impacts. If you're from the Black African household, your median wealth is £34,000. That's it. Now, when we look at it, £34,000 to an average person is still a lot of money, especially the fact when the average person doesn't have a couple of thousands of pounds to put together. But £34,000 in contrast or in comparison to £340,000 is a drop in the ocean. It's just about enough to buy a one-off item like a small car, just about enough for emergency savings. This £34,000 effectively means in our community, there's hardly any equity, and equity is the increase in value that you get from property value going up. There's no investment portfolio. Yes, you might have one or two investments thrown around somewhere, but there's no portfolio. But more importantly, the reason I want to have these conversations is because it's clear as day that there is no shock absorber. There is no emergency money or any buffer to effectively provide or protect you against any financial shocks or emergencies. The truth is that wealth determines the average person's options, what you do, where you go to school, where your child goes to school, where you live, whether you can invest, what you can invest in. But more importantly, and this is a conversation I've been having recently with my community, it's whether you retire with any level of dignity. Will you be able to have a comfortable retirement, or will you be reliable on someone else, maybe your children, maybe your grandchildren, maybe the government? I know it's a sad conversation and maybe something you might be working hard to break the mold, but we've got to have these conversations. So please don't hate me. So this gap that we're talking about, 34,000 versus 314,000, it's not specifically just about the money. It's about life choices. It's about freedom. I want to address some of this, maybe from a historical point of view, because this will help us understand why we're here and what we can potentially do to make things better for the future. So while most white British families had decades to build wealth through property, and this is the post-war generation, many people benefited through right to buy, and that's an entire conversation by itself. And we can talk about Thatcher and the impact of Thatcher and the Black community at a later stage. Right to buy, cheap mortgages, significantly rise in house prices, which significantly shot up in the 80s and the 90s. Many were able to benefit from that. But in comparison to the Black African household, if we look at history, many of the Black African households began to come and settle in the UK in the 80s and the 90s. So imagine packing your bags from Africa, coming over to the UK, but you've literally come at a time when property is booming and is at the top of the market. Many people could get access to right to buy properties, mortgages were significantly cheaper, and property was shooting up. So you've come here with a few bags, but no means to get on a property ladder or own and get on that train of growth. So you've come into a market effectively where generational wealth has already started and is already being built, and you cannot partake. This is not an excuse, it's just to help you understand the historical point of view as to why we are where we are. I saw some data from the government that around 70% of white British households own their own home, compared to just 22% of Black African households. So that gap is absolutely massive. And on every data, statistics, every barometer, every study you look at, property ownership is the fastest and most consistent way to build wealth. But for many Black Africans, they could not partake in that wealth building exercise. And what I found absolutely fascinating, which is one of the reasons I decided to create this video, was that the ONS, the Office of National Statistics, showed that the median property wealth for Black Africans is a big fat resounding zero. Zero. That means over half have no net property wealth at all. Zero. That doesn't blow your mind. And if that doesn't put a rocket in your back, then I don't know what will. The main crux of this video is to give you some education on the history, on the economic side, the societal side, but more importantly, one that's not spoken about. We speak about history, we speak about the economy, we speak about society, but we don't talk about financials. We don't talk about the financial education that comes with property ownership. The reason why we see this wealth increasing is because many people that bought properties at the right price, right location, right strategies, also, whether intentionally or unintentionally, educate their children on how to manage those assets, because the children will be receiving those assets. And because there are so few Black Africans with property ownership or property wealth, the conversation is rarely had at home, because the conversation in many cases is about survival as opposed to wealth creation. And this is why we will carry on seeing these massive wealth disparities. The thing is that £280,000 gap is not just about today. This video is not just about today. It's actually about the next generation. If we don't close this gap, if we don't put systems in place and get educated on property ownership, property investment, asset accumulation, asset dispensation, then that gap carries on widening and the conversation will carry on with no significant change. But I also want to say this. When you hear that the average Black African household holds a total of £34,000 in total wealth, it's not just a matter of effort, because every data suggests that the Black African cohort or the Black African community are exceptionally hardworking. And sometimes hard work is what keeps us poor. We can talk about that at a later stage, because efficient, effective and smart work in many cases boost people's net worth. But that's for another conversation. But the truth is, once you understand the historic context, we can start to put systems in place to make sure that the future is completely different. This is about education. It's about financial education. It's about ownership. If you want me to break down how you can start building generational wealth from zero, make sure you subscribe and let's fix this gap that we have right now, one household at a time. Hey guys, if you got any value from this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below.